Now for global business updates, my colleague on the business side of things, Rotus Oddiri, joins us. Rotus, it's great to be on this side of things, the way it is.
Good. It is Boston Amofaya, the legend. Gostin, thank you, of course, for holding the fort on the Global Business Report as always. Good morning to you. Good morning to you, Ayo. Good morning to
I'm representing the big boys here today.
I'm so jealous right now.
Of course.
It's business speak here, but good morning, Rotus. Good to see you.
Good morning, Ayo, and all our viewers. Look, it's all oil today. That's the focus. I brought this up yesterday. Ayo, we discussed this with Dr. Abati. Oil prices still are pretty low. I mean, we're looking at a level not seen since late 2023. So you got Brent crude at about 73 or 72.94 in early trading this morning. West Texas Intermediate at 69. And I've added Nigeria's benchmark. I did this yesterday. I will continue to do that just to remind people where our oil benchmark is for the 2024 budget in order to fund everything that we need to fund, which is at 77.96. So if we move on from there now to what's been going on around the world, it's still on oil. The American Petroleum Institute. This is official data is to come out later today, but the preliminary data suggests that there has been a drawdown to the tune of about 7.4 million barrels equivalent of oil on U.S. crude inventory. So you've got emergency strategic petroleum, I have to say strategic and petroleum at the same time, strategic petroleum reserves for emergency, and then you've got other reserves for commercial use. So we'll get data, but then this shows that, there's an election coming up. You just had Adefemi talking about the debates and everything. The Americans do not want oil prices to go up, and this also favors shale oil producers as well, who like it when oil prices are low because they can ramp up production. So keep that in mind. So we'll get the official numbers later, but this is what we're seeing in terms of the preliminary numbers with respect to a 7.4 million barrel drawdown. We go to Libya, which is up next. You should have a map in front of you showing the competing military forces with the oil reserves or oil production in the middle of it all. So in blue, you've got the Western UN-backed, forces of Tripoli. That's the National Unity Government, as it's called, although there's an irony there because there's no unity in Libya right now. And then you've got is that, burnt orange or brown to the east, the national, the government of Libyan National Army, which is run by Mr. Khalifa. We're going to get to the leader of that faction. And then you've got in yellow some other affiliated forces. So if we get to the gridlock that's been taking place in Libya, there's three individuals at the heart of what's been going on now. You've got Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deby, who was installed back in after elections in 2020, or rather 2014, excuse me, that split Libya in two, essentially. There were supposed to be elections in 2021 after a UN-backed ceasefire in 2020. That hasn't happened. So Prime Minister Hamid Deby has been in office since then. He's been feuding with the gentleman in the middle, who, of course, was at the center of the latest flare-up that caused oil production to be halted, and that is Central Bank Governor Sadiq Al-Kabir. Whoever runs the central bank essentially runs the proceeds, the dollar proceeds that come into Libya from oil sales. Now, then of course to the right, you've got military commander Khalifa Haftar, who runs those other forces that are out in the east that have been feuding with the Western government-backed forces. So the issue here is that the feud between Prime Minister Deby and Central Bank Governor Al-Kabir erupted when the Prime Minister moved to remove the central bank governor from office, saying that he has been mismanaging funds. Now, the other flip side of this is that the forces in the East say that they want him to remain in office because he has been, sympathetic to them. And basically in Libya, what you're seeing is that the West is more affluent and the East is more in fiscal troubles, a lot of poverty there. And so they, however, in the East have been shutting down oil production in Libya, which have been using as a bargaining chip. So here's the latest thing. They're saying now that all the factions will possibly agree on a new central bank governor soon. But the issue is, who will they pick? If you can control the central bank, again, as I said, you control what happens with government oil proceeds. Now, Libya has been doing about 1.2 million barrels per day, but oil production came down by about 500,000 barrels. So really, they should be doing about 1.7, maybe even 1.8. If you take this into the wider context of oil prices, in fact, Sadiq Al-Kabir, the central bank governor, was on Bloomberg, I believe, yesterday or the day before. And when he said that this agreements will come into place, oil prices fell even further because you essentially have more supply coming into the global market. So let's move from there now to OPEC Plus. Reports suggest that OPEC is going to back down on the oil outputs increase in October of 180,000 barrels that was initially agreed upon in June at the last meeting. And why is OPEC doing that? They're doing that because they've seen what's been going on with oil prices falling to lows not seen since late 2023. And essentially, low demand coming from China. You've got the U.S. situation where they don't want oil to go higher. And basically, higher supply, lower demand is what is prompting OPEC to possibly push back. I want to now listen to what this means for Nigeria. We had Bismarck Rewane of the Financial Derivatives Company Limited, renowned economist. This was him on the Global Business Report just a few weeks ago, talking about oil prices at $80 a barrel and what they mean for Nigeria. Take a listen.
I think the conventional logic seems to point to the fact that the price of oil will hang around $80 a barrel. And what does $80 a barrel mean for Nigeria? Our break-even point for achieving fiscal neutrality is probably about $95 to $100 a barrel.
Wow.
So at $80 a barrel, we still have some room to make up for.
So you have some room to make up at 80, but Brent is now at 72, 73. So imagine what that means. Now, to compound this even further, Citigroup put out a note, an analyst notes, late yesterday, early this morning or so, saying that they see oil prices falling to $50 a barrel on average in 2025. Now, Citigroup, they put out all these notes, they come out, UBS put out a counter note saying they see $80. So Citi, they've been wrong in the past, but they are basically pointing to everything that is out there in the market. They're saying that the markets could lose confidence in OPEC if they're not able to defend prices where they are, which of course, as I just mentioned, OPEC now is saying they might not actually increase their production cuts now because of where oil prices are currently. But Citi, again, they're pointing to the situation in Libya, adding more production, more supply to the markets. They're pointing to the weakness in Chinese demand. So look, you put all this together, and I'm saying it now, with where Nigeria is fiscally. You've seen Adefemi go through some of the papers now. A lot of these things that we need to have funded from, palliatives, infrastructure. If oil prices remain where they are and continue through the rest of this year into 2025, that is a big red light for Nigeria's fiscal structure and where we see things going forward. That's our update for today.
Woo, Rotus, very sobering stuff there when you break it down with the numbers. And I'm so glad you also put the benchmark number that Nigeria is working with, which is $77. Oil going down to $50, I think that may be a bit of an alarmist position, but I think it's an important conversation to be had, really, especially for us here at home. I believe yesterday our State House correspondent shared with us the news that our foreign excess crude account only has $500,000 in it. That's Nigeria's foreign excess crude account. So if you just think that's like our sovereign wealth fund has $500,000, less than $470,000 in it. It's not a good indicator of where we are fiscally as a nation. However, I want to look at Libya very quickly, Libya is an important case study for us as Africans, especially in Western Africa, for a number of reasons. The first being international, if you want to call it interference or, negotiation or whatever you call it, may not always be the best answer. A nation's solutions are always best internally generated. Libya has been divided since the fall of Gaddafi. Yes, you may call Gaddafi whatever name you will under the sun. However, under him, Libya was stable. Under him, we also didn't have an influx of extremism that then came out of Libya and came and started affecting Nigeria and the Sahel region. And now you look at the back and forth that's happening between Prime Minister Debeba and the Haftar, Field Marshal Haftar, and then there's a central bank governor. The nation is divided because of oil. So it's an important conversation, case study for us to look at here in Nigeria to ensure that we resolve our problems internally and that we manage our resources in a way that's equitable to the whole country, from north to the south, to the oil producing regions, to those that don't produce oil, because foreign powers do tend to take advantage of that disunity and create an atmosphere where they can profit off of our natural resources.
Great stuff, as Rotus will put it. Great stuff, great stuff. I think, let me just take on that Libya, Rotus, for just a second. Again, the lesson for me in this is about how to put structures in place. How does a country broken into several bits and pieces manage to produce more oil steadily than Nigeria? And that's very interesting, because you've got different generals. We've got all warring factions, various geopolitical interest in Libya, and they kept producing oil. The oil industry never stops for one day from producing sturdily 1.7, 1.8 million barrels per day. And you know what? They keep taking every dollar from this barrel straight into the central bank and lodge it in. I don't have a figure right now, but the Libya central bank is sitting on a pile of billions of dollars of money from oil, despite different generals, different individuals running the country from different areas. And that tells you the type of structure that the late Muammar Gaddafi, the head of that country, put in place while he was still in power. What is the lesson here? If we have some measure of political stability in Nigeria, we have a national oil organization or company that is not able to, at a point we're doing 700,000 barrels per day, and we don't have a civil war. We don't have warring generals in the country, in the manner of speaking. So what's the lesson there for me is that we need institutions that will be able to make things very difficult. But again, finally, as far as the pressures are concerned, I think we're right now underwater. I'm sure you are good to have the benchmark at 77. If you have 77 and prices below the lower end of that 70, of course, you know you are doing a negative run. So where do we go from here? So help us God.
So help us God. News this morning, Rotus, in the face of the reality of revenue crunch and the need for us to up revenue generation here in Nigeria, and now we get this news about oil prices dropping. Of course, the focus now is on OPEC+. The news is that this morning that they're looking at, perhaps looking again at their plans to cut production costs across their producers, and how that would impact, because a number of them, not just Nigerian, a number of the countries that make up OPEC+ depend primarily on at least $80 per barrel for their budgets. And so where we peg that on we already have a budget deficit in Nigeria currently. How is that going to affect the supplementary budget, our debt as well? So it doesn't look very good currently for us. But then yesterday I was watching you at the non-oil sector conference, I think, seminar held by Zenith Bank, and then we begin to talk about the possibilities of exploring that and not just seeing it as a second option, because the way it's looking, and with Citigroup's projection that it would even plunge even lower, then we need to begin to be quite inventive with regards to how we view, generation of revenue, looking at other sources. Yesterday you talked about agriculture. They looked at different other sectors and seeing how we can really tap into those resources that we have as a nation. On the flip side, South Africans are smiling to the filling stations as fuel prices have come down for the fourth time consecutively as a result of a number of factors. One of which, of course, is a global oil price slump, and second of all is the fact that the South African rand has strengthened against the dollar, meaning that the state has revised petrol prices again and again. We, the producers of crude oil here in Nigeria, are grappling with increase in pump price of petrol, and SA is being able to make that work for them, even though when it comes to producing oil, are not competing with Nigeria currently. So just to see how things are working. But again, like I would say, I believe that the focus now, take this as an advantage, is begin to look at other sources of revenue generation for the nation. We can no longer depend on oil. I don't know if it will get better as the years progress. Well, thank you very much, Rotus.